The stars looked different now. Commander Jake Harrison stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Ship Constellation and stared at the main screen. For 3 years, humanity had been exploring space with their new faster-than-light engines. They had found empty planets, strange rocks floating in the dark, and clouds of gas that glowed with beautiful colors. But they had never found anyone else out here. Until today, the alien ship was huge. It made the constellation look like a small boat next to a cruise liner. The ship had smooth curves and seemed to shine with its own light. Jake had never seen anything so advanced. His hands felt sweaty as he gripped the arms of his command chair. Lieutenant Katie Morgan was trying everything she could think of to talk to the alien ship. Her fingers moved fast across her control panel. She tried radio waves, light signals, and every kind of communication method Earth had invented. For 20 long minutes, there was nothing but silence. Then the screen flickered and came to life. The creature on the screen looked almost human, but not quite. Its skin had a light blue color, like the sky on a clear winter day. Its eyes were bigger than human eyes, and the pupils were shaped like thin lines going up and down like a cat's eyes. When it spoke, the computer took a moment to change the alien words into English. The alien's voice was cold and hard. It said that its name was Ambassador Velcara from something called the Zynthian Collective. It told them they were in space that belonged to others. The ambassador called humans primitive ones, like they were children who didn't know any better. It wanted to know who they were and why they were here. Jake tried to stand tall and look confident, even though his heart was beating fast. He told the ambassador his name and said he came from Earth. He explained that humans wanted peace. They didn't know this space belonged to anyone. They were just exploring, trying to learn about the galaxy. They weren't trying to cause trouble. The ambassador's face didn't change much, but Jake could tell it wasn't impressed. The alien said it had never heard of Earth before. It thought it was strange that humans had ships that could travel faster than light, when everything else about them looked so basic and old-fashioned. The ambassador wanted Jake to explain how humans discovered this technology. Lieutenant Chris Palmer, who took care of the ship's engines, leaned toward Jake from his workstation. He spoke quietly so only Jake could hear. He said the alien ship was scanning them with some kind of energy he had never seen before. The aliens were definitely looking at everything on the constellation. Jake kept watching the screen. He told the ambassador that humans had figured out faster-than-light travel on their own through research and hard work. He said he would be happy to talk more about it. Maybe they could meet in person and start building a friendship between Earth and the Zynthian people. That's when the ambassador's eyes got a little smaller, like it was looking at something it didn't like. The alien said Jake didn't understand what was happening. It explained that there was something called the Galactic Council. This council had 643 different alien species in it. Every single one of those species had to prove they were good enough before joining. The council tested them and judged them. Humans would have to do the same thing. The ambassador said its people were going to come aboard the constellation to look around. If the humans tried to stop them, there would be trouble. The screen went black. Jake felt the mood on the bridge change immediately. Everyone was tense and worried. His crew members looked at him, waiting for him to tell them what to do. He could see they were scared, but they were also angry. Nobody liked being told what to do by strangers, especially when those strangers acted like they were better than everyone else. Jake told Katie to contact Earth Command right away. He needed them to know what was happening. Then he asked Chris about their weapons. What could the constellation use to defend itself if things went bad? Chris brought up a display showing all their weapons. He explained that they had missiles, laser guns, and something new called a railgun. The railgun was still being tested. Nobody had ever used it in a real fight. It was just an idea that might work or might not. Jake thought about it for a moment. He told Chris to get the railgun ready but not to turn it on yet. He didn't want to make the aliens angry or give them a reason to attack. Then he asked Katie if she had reached Earth Command. Katie explained that there was a problem. Radio signals took a long time to travel through space. Her message would take 8 minutes to reach Earth. Then Earth's answer would take another 8 minutes to get back to them. That meant they would have to wait at least 16 minutes before they heard anything. And by then, things might have already gone very wrong. Lieutenant Danny Carter was watching the tactical screen that showed what was happening in the space around them. He spoke up suddenly. The alien ship was sending out smaller ships. 6 small craft were heading straight toward the constellation. They were moving fast, much faster than anything humans had built. Jake watched the small ships getting closer on the display. They moved with perfect coordination, like they had done this 1,000 times before. Their technology was clearly way ahead of anything Earth had. In that moment, Jake understood something important. Humans weren't the most powerful beings in the universe anymore. They weren't even close. There were other species out here. Species that had been traveling the stars for a very long time. And those species thought humans were nothing special. Jake took a deep breath and made his decision. He told everyone on the ship to get ready for possible fighting. He ordered the shields to be turned on, but he also told everyone not to charge up the weapons yet. He wanted to see what the aliens would do first. Maybe they really just wanted to look around. Maybe there wouldn't be any violence today. But if there was going to be trouble, Jake wanted his crew to be ready for it. As the alien craft got closer and closer, Jake couldn't stop thinking about what this meant for humanity. People on Earth had dreamed about meeting aliens for hundreds of years. They had made movies and written books about it. Some people thought aliens would be friendly teachers who would share their wisdom. Other people thought aliens would be monsters who wanted to destroy Earth. But nobody had really imagined this. Nobody had thought that aliens would treat humans like annoying children who were in the way. Jake looked at the tactical display one more time. The railgun system was shown there, ready to use if needed. It was a simple weapon, really. It used powerful magnets to throw a piece of metal really fast. The aliens used fancy energy weapons and plasma guns. They probably thought a weapon that just threw metal was stupid and old-fashioned, but sometimes simple things worked better than complicated things. At least Jake hoped that was true. The 6 alien craft were almost at the constellation now. In a few minutes, they would dock with the ship. Aliens would walk through the corridors of a human vessel for the first time. They would look at human technology and judge it. They would decide if humanity was worthy of joining their galactic club, or if humans should stay home and be quiet. Jake Harrison had joined the Space Force to explore the universe and discover wonderful new things. He had wanted to be like the explorers from history books, the ones who sailed across oceans and found new lands. But those old explorers had sometimes found places where other people already lived, and those meetings hadn't always gone well. Sometimes the explorers were welcomed. Sometimes they were attacked. And sometimes the explorers did terrible things to the people they met. Now humanity was on the other side of that story. They were the ones being discovered. They were the ones being judged by strangers who thought they knew better. Jake didn't like it, but there wasn't much he could do about it right now. He was one ship in the middle of nowhere, facing aliens with much better technology. All he could do was try to keep his crew safe and learn everything he could about these Xinthians and their galactic council. Maybe humans would find a way to prove themselves worthy. Maybe they would earn respect through actions instead of just accepting whatever the aliens decided. Or maybe, just maybe, humans would find a way to show the galaxy that being primitive didn't mean being weak. That sometimes the simplest solutions were the most effective ones. That sometimes the new kids on the block had ideas the old powers had forgotten about. The first alien craft connected to the constellation's docking port with a soft thud that echoed through the ship. Jake stood up from his command chair. It was time to meet their visitors face to face. Whatever happened next would change everything for humanity. For better or worse, Earth was no longer alone in the universe. The airlock door opened with a hissing sound. 3 Xinthian soldiers stepped onto the constellation. They were tall, almost 7 feet high. Their armor looked like it was made of light itself, shimmering and changing colors as they moved. Each one carried a weapon that Jake didn't recognize, but he could tell from the way they held them that these were dangerous tools. The soldiers looked around the docking bay like they owned the place. Jake was waiting for them with Katie and 2 security officers. Lieutenant Greg Barnes and Corporal Linda Shaw stood ready, their hands near their own weapons but not touching them. Jake wanted to show strength without starting a fight. The lead Xinthian looked at the humans the way someone might look at bugs crawling on the ground. The alien spoke in a voice that carried power and command. He said his name was Enforcer Railgun. He told them that his team would search the whole ship. They would look at the computers and download information. The humans had to do everything the Xinthians asked, or they would be forced to cooperate. Railgun asked if Jake understood what he was saying. Jake felt his jaw get tight, but he kept his voice calm and steady. He said he understood that the Xinthians had questions. Humans were willing to answer those questions. But the constellation was an Earth ship. It belonged to humanity. Jake couldn't just let strangers go through everything without following proper rules for how different species should treat each other. Krelvan took one step forward. His hand moved toward his weapon. He told Jake that humans didn't get to make demands. Nobody knew who humans were. They could be thieves or pirates or something worse. The Galactic Council had rules for dealing with unknown species. The Xinthians were following those rules. Jake could either cooperate or be labeled as hostile. Those were the only two choices. Katie's hand started to move toward her gun, but Jake caught her eye and shook his head just a little bit. This wasn't the right time to fight. They were outnumbered and outgunned. Fighting now would only get people killed and wouldn't solve anything. Jake took a slow breath and spoke quietly. He said the Xinthians could inspect the ship, but he would go with them, and his people would watch everything they did. He wanted to make sure nothing went wrong. The enforcer seemed to think about this for a few seconds. Then he nodded once, quickly. That was good enough for him. For the next 2 hours, Jake followed the Xinthians as they went through his ship piece by piece. They looked at everything in a very organized way. They copied all the navigation data that showed where the constellation had been. They scanned the rooms where the crew slept. They took samples from the engine core. The whole time, their faces never showed any emotion except for that same look of barely hidden disgust, like they were touching something dirty. When they reached the weapons bay, something changed. Krelvan stopped at the railgun. He pulled out a scanning device and ran it over the weapon mount. For the first time since boarding the ship, Jake saw surprise on the alien's face. The enforcer's eyes got wider, and he stood very still for a moment. Krelvan spoke slowly, like he was trying to understand something that didn't make sense. He said the weapon used kinetic acceleration. It didn't shoot energy beams or plasma. It threw solid chunks of metal at very high speeds. Jake nodded and confirmed what the enforcer had said. Yes, it was a railgun. It used electromagnetic rails to make a projectile go incredibly fast. Simple physics.
Simple engineering.
Nothing fancy about it. One of the other Xinthians started talking quickly in their own language. Krelvan snapped back at him in the same language, his voice sharp and commanding. Then the enforcer turned back to Jake. He said this kind of technology was primitive. Kinetic weapons didn't work well. They were inefficient and wasteful. The Galactic Council had stopped using weapons like this thousands of years ago. Energy shields made them completely useless. There was no point in having such old technology. Jake kept his voice neutral, not showing any emotion. He said that might be true. But humans had to work with what they had. Human energy weapon technology wasn't as good as what the Council species had, so humans had to find other ways to defend themselves. They had to compensate for their lack of advanced technology. Krelvan waved his hand at the railgun like it was garbage and moved on with his inspection. But Jake noticed something interesting. The enforcer kept looking back at the weapon. His eyes would drift back to it, like he was trying to figure out why humans would waste time and resources on something so outdated. It was clear the concept bothered him somehow. Finally, after what felt like forever, the inspection ended. The Xinthians gathered all the data they had collected and got ready to leave. Krelvan turned to face Jake one last time in the docking bay. There was something in his expression that might have been pity, but Jake couldn't be sure. The enforcer delivered his judgment. He said that humans had basic faster-than-light capability, but their technology was many generations behind what the Council considered standard. Humanity would be classified as a developing civilization. That meant humans were restricted in where they could go. They could only travel in certain designated areas. If humans were found anywhere else, their ships would be taken away or destroyed. Jake was ordered to return to Earth and wait. Someday the Council might contact Earth, but that could take decades. Until then, humans should not wander around the galaxy. Katie couldn't stay quiet anymore. She asked what would happen if humans refused to follow those orders. Krelvan looked at her, and this time Jake was sure he saw pity in the alien's eyes. The enforcer said that if humans refused, they would learn why 643 species had chosen to join the Council instead of fighting it. He told them to travel safely while they still could. The words sounded almost like a threat. The Xinthians left. Their shuttle detached from the constellation and flew back to their huge mothership. Within a few minutes, the alien vessel's engines glowed bright and it disappeared, jumping to faster-than-light speed. The constellation was alone again in the emptiness of space. When Jake got back to the bridge, nobody said anything at first. The crew looked at him with faces that showed anger, fear, and confusion all mixed together. They had just been inspected like criminals. They had been told where they could and couldn't go in their own galaxy. They had been treated like children who needed to be watched and controlled. Finally, Chris spoke up from his station. He said Earth Command was sending a reply. They wanted a full report of everything that had happened. Jake nodded slowly. His mind was already working through what all of this meant. Humanity had just learned a hard lesson. They were small fish in a very, very large pond. There were hundreds of alien species out here. Many of them were far more advanced than humans. And those advanced species had formed a government that controlled who could do what and where they could go. But Jake had noticed something during the inspection. When Krelvan saw the railgun, he had been confused. The idea that humans would use such a simple, old-fashioned weapon had genuinely surprised him. The Xinthians were so used to their energy shields and plasma weapons that they couldn't imagine why anyone would bother with something as basic as throwing metal really fast. Maybe that was important. Maybe the fact that humans thought differently could matter somehow. The council species had been using the same technology for thousands of years. They all did things the same way. They all followed the same rules. But humans hadn't been part of that system. Humans had developed their own solutions to problems. Different solutions. Solutions that the council might not expect. Jake turned to look at Katie. He told her to send the report to Earth Command, but he also wanted her to include something else. He wanted her to tell them about how the Xinthians had reacted to the railgun, about how they had dismissed it as primitive and useless, about how they seemed to think their energy shields made them invincible. Katie looked at him with understanding in her eyes. She nodded and got to work on the message. She knew what Jake was thinking. If humanity was going to survive in this new galactic order, they needed every advantage they could get. And sometimes an advantage came from being underestimated. The Xinthians thought kinetic weapons were obsolete. They thought humans were primitive. They thought Earth would just accept its place and stay quiet. Maybe they were right. Maybe humanity would have to bow to the Council's authority. Or maybe, just maybe, the Council had made a mistake. Maybe they had forgotten that primitive didn't mean powerless. Maybe they had become so confident in their advanced technology that they had stopped looking for threats from unexpected directions. Maybe they had given humanity exactly the information it needed to find a weakness in their defenses. Jake sat back in his command chair and watched Earth get closer on the viewing screen as the constellation headed home. He had gone into space looking for adventure and discovery. He had found something much more serious. He had found a challenge, and if there was one thing humans were good at, it was rising to challenges the Galactic Council thought they had put humanity in its place. They thought they had shown humans their role in the galaxy. They thought the matter was settled. But they didn't understand human nature. They didn't understand that telling humans they couldn't do something was the best way to make sure they would try. They didn't understand. 6 months had passed since Jake's meeting with the Xinthians. During that time, Earth had been very quiet. All the exploration ships had been called back home. No human vessels went wandering through space anymore. To anyone watching from outside, it might have looked like humanity had accepted its place in the galaxy, like they were being good little primitives who did what they were told. But anyone who thought that didn't really understand humans. Admiral Patricia. Klein stood in the observation deck of Earth Defense Station Omega. She was looking out the window at the construction crews who were finishing their work. The station was massive, bigger than anything humanity had ever built before, and all over its surface, like metal thorns on a steel rose, were railgun batteries. Hundreds of them. Patricia was in her 50s with gray hair pulled back tight and eyes that saw everything. She had spent her whole career in the military, and she knew how to fight. Colonel Marcus Diaz stood next to her, looking at his electronic notepad. Patricia asked him for a status report without taking her eyes off the window. Marcus told her that all 6 defense stations were now ready to use. They covered every major route that led to Earth. The railgun networks were online and had been tested. Something called Project Kinetic was complete and ready to go. Patricia allowed herself a small smile. After the humiliation of first contact, something amazing had happened. Earth's governments had done something they had never managed to do before. They had united completely. Every nation on the planet had poured money and resources into a single goal. They wanted to make sure humanity would never be helpless again. Never again would humans have to stand there while aliens treated them like primitives who didn't matter. The aliens thought kinetic weapons were primitive. They were right in a way. Railguns were based on simple physics that humans had understood for a long time. But primitive didn't mean bad. It just meant different. And while the Galactic Council spent thousands of years perfecting their energy shields and plasma weapons, humanity had spent 6 months doing what they did best. They had engineered a solution to an impossible problem. Lieutenant Alex Burton called out from the sensor station. He was picking up strange readings. Multiple ships were appearing on the sensors. They were coming out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. Patricia's expression got hard and serious. She asked how many ships there were. Alex checked his displays. 12 vessels. They matched the descriptions from Jake's report. Cynthian collective ships, and they were broadcasting messages on all frequencies trying to contact Earth. Patricia told him to put the message through so everyone could hear it. Ambassador Velcara appeared on the main screen. Patricia noticed that the alien looked far less friendly than during the first contact. His face showed anger and something that might have been outrage. The ambassador's voice was cold as ice. He said he was there to deliver the Council's judgment. Humanity had built military installations without permission. This violated the restrictions that had been placed on developing civilizations. Humans were supposed to stay in their immediate area. Instead, they had expanded. They had built weapons. This was not acceptable. This could not be allowed. Patricia kept her voice calm and professional. She told the ambassador that humanity had built defensive installations around their home planet. That was their right as a free species. Humans had not made any aggressive moves toward any council member. They were just protecting themselves. Velcara's response was quick and harsh. He said that human rights were whatever the council said they were. Nothing more and nothing less. Humans would take apart these weapons platforms. They would accept council oversight and monitoring. If they refused, the Cynthians would dismantle the platforms themselves. Humans had 1 hour to comply with this order. The screen went dark. Patricia looked around at her command crew. She saw the same determination on every face that she felt in her own heart. This was the moment they had all been preparing for. The moment when humanity would either stand up for itself or bow down forever. Patricia gave her orders clearly. She told the crew to send a message to all defense stations and to the Constellation, battle stations. Everyone should get ready for a fight. Turn on the shields, but don't power up the weapons yet. She wanted to be ready for anything. Marcus spoke quietly so only Patricia could hear. He asked if they were really going to fight the Cynthians. He pointed out that the Council had 643 species behind it. Earth was completely alone out here. Nobody would help them. Patricia turned to face him directly. Her eyes were fierce and determined. She told him about human history. She reminded him that humans had been told they couldn't cross the oceans, but they did it anyway. They were told they couldn't fly, but they built airplanes. They were told they couldn't reach the moon, but they went there too. Every single time when someone said humans couldn't do something, humans proved them wrong. Maybe Earth couldn't win this fight. Maybe the Council was too strong. But Patricia would be damned if humanity didn't make them remember this battle. If the Cynthians wanted a fight, humans would give them one they would never forget. She turned back to the window. The Cynthian fleet was moving closer to Earth. Their ships were moving in a standard formation. Their energy shields were glowing with power. Patricia could see that they were confident. They thought this would be easy. They thought humans would either surrender immediately or put up a weak fight before being crushed. The Cynthians had faced hundreds of species over thousands of years. They had better technology, better weapons, better defenses. They knew they were superior, but they didn't know everything. They didn't know what humanity had been building for the past 6 months. They didn't know that every defense station was loaded with railguns that had been designed specifically to defeat energy shields. They didn't know that human engineers had spent every waking hour calculating trajectories and velocities. They didn't know that Earth had bet everything on a simple idea. An idea the Council had dismissed as primitive and useless. Patricia opened a channel that reached every defense station and every ship in the human fleet. Her voice was calm but carried authority that came from years of command. She told everyone that they were about to show the galaxy what humanity was made of. She ordered all stations to target the lead Cynthian vessel. On her signal, all railgun batteries would fire at the same time. She told them to give the Cynthians a proper welcome. The kind of welcome that would teach them not to underestimate humans ever again. The Cynthian ships kept coming. They didn't change course or slow down. Their energy shields were at maximum power. Those shields were designed to stop every weapon the galaxy had used for the past 10,000 years. The Xinthians were prepared for plasma weapons. They were prepared for particle beams. They were prepared for missiles and lasers and every other kind of energy-based attack. But they were not prepared for rocks thrown really fast. Patricia watched the tactical display showing the enemy fleet. The lead ship was a heavy cruiser, probably carrying the ambassador himself. It was a beautiful ship in its own way, all smooth curves and glowing lights. It represented thousands of years of technological advancement. It was a symbol of the Council's power and superiority. Patricia was about to turn it into scrap metal. The rangefinder on the tactical display turned green. The Xinthian fleet had moved into the perfect position. Every defense station had a clear shot. Every railgun was charged and ready. The targeting computers had calculated everything down to the smallest detail. Distance, velocity, trajectory, timing. Everything was perfect. Patricia took one last look at Earth hanging in space below her. That beautiful blue and green planet where humanity had been born, where humans had learned to walk upright, discovered fire, invented the wheel, split the atom and reached for the stars. That planet had produced a species that refused to bow down, that refused to accept limits, that looked at impossible odds and decided to fight anyway. The Council thought they could push humanity around because humans were primitive. They thought they could dictate terms because they had better technology. They thought they could treat Earth like a child that needed to be disciplined. They were about to learn that they were wrong. Patricia spoke one word. A single word that would change everything. A word that would echo across the galaxy and make every empire tremble. A word that would announce to the universe that humanity was done being pushed around. She said it quietly, almost gently, but with absolute finality. Fire. The railguns fired. From 6 orbital defense stations and 20 combat vessels, hundreds of tungsten carbide projectiles launched into space. Each one weighed 50 kilograms. Each one was accelerated by powerful electromagnetic rails to speeds that seemed impossible. They were moving at 1% of the speed of light. They were just chunks of metal, but at those speeds they carried more kinetic energy than most bombs. The projectiles crossed the distance to the Xinthian fleet in seconds. The alien energy shields activated automatically, just like they were designed to do. Those shields could deflect particle beams. They could disperse plasma bolts. They could stop every energy weapon in the known galaxy. But they couldn't stop a solid piece of metal moving at 30,000. The battle was not over. Patricia knew that destroying one ship, even a big one, was not enough. The Xinthians had 11 ships left and they were starting to recover from their shock. She could see on the tactical display that the alien vessels were beginning to move with purpose again. They were trying to figure out what had happened and how to respond. Captain Nicole reported that the railgun batteries were charged and ready again. The beauty of the railgun system was that it didn't need much time between shots. Energy weapons had to wait for capacitors to recharge. Missile systems had limited ammunition, but the railguns just needed electricity and metal slugs, and the defense stations had plenty of both. Patricia gave the order to continue firing. She told all stations to pick their targets and shoot at will. The human fleet needed to keep up the pressure. They needed to show the Xinthians that the first kill wasn't luck or a fluke. It was a deliberate tactic that would work again and again. The railguns fired again. This time the shots came from different stations at different times, creating a constant stream of projectiles flying toward the enemy fleet. The Xinthians tried to dodge, but their ships were not designed for this kind of combat. Their vessels were built for elegant battles between energy weapons. They were made to face other ships that followed the same rules of warfare that the Council had used for thousands of years. They weren't built to dodge physical objects moving at incredible speeds. A second cruiser took 3 hits in quick succession. The first slug destroyed its engines. The second tore through its command section where the crew controlled the ship. The third hit the reactor that powered everything. The ship didn't just explode. It came apart like a toy being smashed with a hammer. Pieces of hull, equipment, and sadly bodies scattered in all directions. The Xinthian plasma weapons finally started firing back. Bright beams of superheated gas lanced through space toward the human positions. These weapons were powerful and sophisticated. They represented the pinnacle of Council military technology. But Patricia had planned for this. The defense stations were constantly moving, using small thrusters to shift their positions. They never stayed in one spot long enough to be accurately targeted. The human combat ships were even more mobile, darting around like angry wasps. One plasma bolt managed to hit Defense Station Delta's shields. The energy barrier flared bright as it absorbed the impact. For a moment, Patricia worried the shields might fail, but they held. The station shook from the hit, but it was still functional. And more importantly, it immediately fired back. Its railgun batteries sent a salvo of projectiles that caught a Xinthian destroyer on its side. The smaller vessel broke in half, its compartments venting air and debris into space. Marcus read from his display with barely controlled excitement. He reported that the Constellation had scored a hit on its target. Commander Jake had sent a message. Marcus read it out loud. The message said this one was for every species that the Council had ever looked down on. This was for everyone who had been treated like they didn't matter. Patricia felt a grim satisfaction as she watched another Xinthian ship fall to the railgun bombardment. The alien fleet was in full retreat now. Their confidence was shattered along with their vessels. They had come here expecting to intimidate and dominate. They had expected to show up with overwhelming force and watch humans bow down in fear. Instead, they had found a fight. A real fight against an enemy that didn't follow the rules they expected. Alex called out from his station. Someone was trying to contact them. It was Ambassador Velcara. Patricia told him to put the ambassador on screen. She was curious to see what the alien had to say now that his fleet was being destroyed. The ambassador appeared on the viewing screen, and Patricia felt a moment of satisfaction. For the first time, she saw real fear in those alien eyes. Behind Velcara, the bridge of his ship was in chaos. Crew members were running back and forth. Emergency lights were flashing. Damage alarms were sounding. The ambassador's ship had clearly been hit, though not destroyed. Velcara was shouting now, all pretense of diplomatic calm gone. He yelled for the humans to stop firing. He said his fleet was withdrawing. The attack was unprovoked and unjustified. The Council would hear about this atrocity. There would be consequences for what humanity had done. Patricia's expression was cold as ice. She reminded the ambassador that he had come to Earth's home system with warships. He had demanded that humans submit or be destroyed. He had threatened them. Humans had simply chosen a third option. They had chosen to defend themselves. She told Velcara to go back to his council and give them a message. Earth was not interested in their judgment. Earth would defend itself, and if the council sent more ships, those ships would not return home. It was that simple. The ambassador's face showed shock and something that looked like desperation. He said that humans didn't understand what they had done. They had declared war on the entire galactic order. They had attacked council forces. There would be retaliation. The full might of 643 species would come down on Earth. Patricia spoke quietly, but her words carried weight. She told Velcara that he was wrong. Humans hadn't declared war. The Council had declared war when they decided Earth didn't have the right to defend its own planet. Humans were just finishing the conversation that the Xinthians had started. Now the ambassador should get his remaining ships out of the solar system before Patricia finished the conversation permanently. She cut the transmission without waiting for a response. Then she turned to her crew and gave the order to stop firing. They should let the Xinthians go. The point had been made. There was no need to completely destroy the fleet. Better to let some ships escape so they could tell others what had happened here. Fear was a weapon too, and sometimes letting an enemy run away was more effective than killing them all. The remaining Xinthian ships, less than half of their original number, turned and fled. Their faster-than-light engines glowed bright as they prepared to jump away. Within moments they were gone, leaving behind only debris and wreckage. The field of battle was littered with the broken remains of ships that had been symbols of council power. Now they were just scrap metal drifting in the cold void of space. Marcus came to stand beside Patricia at the observation window. They both looked out at the debris field in silence for a moment. Then Marcus spoke.
He said the ambassador was right about one thing.
The council wouldn't let this stand. They would come back with more ships. Many more ships. Maybe hundreds of them. Patricia nodded slowly. She knew he was right. This battle was just the beginning. The council had never been challenged like this before. They had never lost ships to a species they considered primitive. They would have to respond with overwhelming force to maintain their authority. If they didn't, other species might start to question council power. Other civilizations might start to think about standing up for themselves too. But Patricia also knew that humanity had bought itself something valuable. Time. Time to build more defense stations. Time to manufacture more railguns. Time to prepare better defenses. And most importantly, time to send a message to every other species in the galaxy that had ever been pushed around by the Council. She turned to face Marcus and spoke with conviction. She said that humans weren't alone anymore. This battle would become news. Stories would spread through every trade route and communication network in the galaxy. Other species would hear that a primitive civilization had defeated Council ships. They would hear that energy shields could be beaten. They would hear that the Council could bleed. And some of those species would start to wonder if they had to keep bowing down to Council authority. Some of them might decide to stand up too. Marcus considered this. He asked if Patricia really thought other species would join humanity against the Council. Patricia looked out at Earth, rotating slowly below them. The planet's cities were lit up against the darkness, millions of lights representing billions of people. People who had just won their first victory in a war they didn't choose but wouldn't run from. She said that humans had spent their entire history being told they were too weak or too primitive to achieve great things. Every time they had proven the doubters wrong. Now they had done it again on a galactic scale. And yes, she believed other species would see this and be inspired. She believed that some of them would reach out. Some of them would want to stand with humanity against the Council's tyranny. She turned back to Marcus with determination in her eyes. She told him to start preparing for the next phase. They needed to expand their defenses. They needed to reach out to potential allies. And they needed to get ready for the storm that was coming. Because the Council would return. That was certain. But when they did, they would find humanity ready. And they would find that humans were not alone anymore. The battle had been won. The first shots of a much larger war had been fired. Humanity had shown the galaxy that primitive weapons could defeat advanced technology if used correctly. That simple solutions could beat complicated ones. That courage and determination could overcome superior numbers. But most importantly, humanity had shown that the Galactic Council was not invincible. That their authority could be challenged. That their power could be resisted. And once that lesson was learned, 3 months had passed since the Battle of Earth. The news had spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Every trade ship, every communication relay, every diplomatic channel was buzzing with the story. A primitive species with crude technology had defeated a Xinthian enforcement fleet. More importantly, they had done it using weapons that everyone thought were obsolete. Commander Jake Harrison sat in his ready room aboard the Constellation, reading through intelligence reports. The information was coming from unexpected places. Merchant vessels were sharing gossip. Independent traders were passing along rumors. Even some diplomatic channels that had never contacted Earth before were now reaching out. Species that had never heard of humanity 6 months ago were now very interested in talking. Katie entered the room carrying her electronic notepad. She had an amused look on her face. She told Jake he needed to see the latest message. It was another request for a meeting. That made 23 requests just this week. Jake took the notepad and read the message. Something called the Vortown Republic wanted to discuss trade agreements and defense cooperation. They were offering to share their mining technology if humans would share the railgun specifications. Katie pulled up more information about the Vortans. She explained that they were a small civilization with only about 40 worlds. They lived in the outer rim of the galaxy, far from the Council's center of power. For the past century, the Vortans had been paying tribute to the Council just to maintain their independence. According to the intelligence reports, 3 other small civilizations had already stopped paying their tribute since news of Earth's battle had spread. Jake leaned back in his chair, thinking about what this meant. He said that humans hadn't just won a battle. They had broken something important. They had broken the illusion that the Council was invincible. For thousands of years, the Council had maintained power through fear and technological superiority. Now both of those things were being questioned. Katie agreed. She said the Council knew it too. Intelligence suggested they were holding an emergency session. Word was they were considering sending a full battle fleet to Earth. Not just to inspect or arrest humans this time. They wanted to make an example of humanity. They wanted to show every species in the galaxy what happened when you defied Council authority. Before Jake could respond, the ship's communication system crackled to life. A voice called for Jake to come to the bridge immediately. They had an unscheduled visitor. Someone who wanted to dock with the Constellation. Jake and Katie looked at each other with curiosity and headed to the bridge. Chris was at his station and his eyes were wide with surprise. He told Jake that a small ship was requesting permission to dock. The ship said it was from something called the Talnari Confederation. They claimed they wanted to join humanity. Jake asked what that meant. Join humanity? Join them in what? Chris said the aliens were transmitting a message now. He put it on the main screen so everyone could see. The being that appeared was insect-like. It had multiple arms and eyes that looked like they were made of many small lenses all grouped together. When it spoke, the translation came through clearly. It said its name was Envoy Ziktar from the Talnari Confederation. The Talnari had been watching humanity's defiance of the Council with great interest. For too long, smaller species had been forced to either submit to Council authority or face destruction. Humans had shown there was another way. The Talnari wanted to propose an alliance with Earth. Jake felt the weight of this moment settling on his shoulders. This was bigger than just a battle between ships. This was about changing how the entire galaxy worked. He told the envoy honestly that he didn't have the authority to negotiate alliances, but he could put the Talnari in contact with Earth's diplomatic representatives. They could work out the details. The envoy said that would be acceptable. But there was something else Jake needed to know. Humanity was not alone anymore. The Council had ruled through fear and technological superiority for many generations. Humans had proven that both could be overcome. Word about the Railgun technology was already spreading. Independent scientists across the galaxy were working to understand how it bypassed energy shields. The Council's main advantage was crumbling. Their power was being questioned for the first time in living memory. Jake spoke quietly. He said he understood that the Council wouldn't accept this situation. They would respond with everything they had. Ziktar agreed with a clicking sound that the translator rendered as a sigh. Yes, the Council would come with their full might. They would try to destroy Earth completely, but if humanity could stand against that attack, others would stand with them. That was why the envoy had come, to offer the Talnari fleet in Earth's defense. The fleet might be small, but it was loyal, and it would fight for the right of all species to exist on their own terms. Over the following weeks, more ships arrived in Earth's solar system. The Vortan Republic sent military advisors who helped improve the defense stations. A species called the Corel offered their advanced sensor technology, which could detect incoming ships much earlier. Even some individual vessels from Council species showed up. Their crews had become disgusted with the heavy-handed tactics their governments used against smaller civilizations. They wanted to stand for something better. Admiral Patricia Klein stood in the strategy room at Earth Defense Command. Around her were not just human officers anymore. There were representatives from 7 different alien species. All of them were united by a common goal. They wanted to defend their right to exist without bowing to Council authority. They wanted freedom. Patricia brought up a holographic display showing the solar system and spoke to the assembled group. She told them that scouts had reported the Council fleet was 2 weeks away from Earth. The fleet consisted of 300 vessels. The Council was bringing battleships, carriers, and support craft. They were not taking any chances this time. They meant to crush the resistance completely and send a message to every species that was watching. Envoy Ziktar made a clicking sound with his mandibles as he thought. He pointed out that 300 ships was a huge portion of the Council's total military force. They were stretching themselves thin across the galaxy to gather this fleet. Other sectors would be vulnerable now. Other regions would have reduced patrols and defenses. Patricia nodded. That was exactly what she had been counting on. She explained that this battle was not just about defending Earth anymore. It was about proving that the Council could be challenged. Every species that the Council had bullied or exploited would be watching this battle. The outcome would determine the future of the galaxy. Commander Trevlar from the Vortan Republic spoke up. His people had never fought in large-scale battles. Their vessels were designed primarily for defense. He wanted to know how the Vortans could best help in the coming fight. Patricia smiled at the question. She explained that humanity had learned something important throughout its history. Wars were not won just by having the strongest weapons. They were won through strategy, through unity, and through the will to fight for something bigger than yourself. The Council thought they were facing one primitive species. They were about to learn they were facing an idea. and ideas could not be killed with warships. She activated the tactical display more fully. It showed the defensive positions around Earth and the projected routes the Council fleet would take. She pointed out that humanity now had 40 defense stations, each loaded with multiple railgun batteries. They had 60 combat vessels from Earth and another 30 from their new allies. The Council had superior numbers, but the defenders had terrain advantage, time to prepare, and something the Council lacked: Katie, who had been promoted to lieutenant commander and now served on Patricia's staff, asked what that was. What did the defenders have that the Council didn't? Patricia looked around the room at all the different species represented there. Species that had never worked together before. Species that came from different worlds with different cultures, all united now because humanity had refused to give up. She said they had motivation. The Council was fighting to maintain power and authority. The defenders were fighting for freedom, for the right to exist on their own terms, for the chance to build a galaxy where might didn't automatically make right. That difference in motivation made all the difference in the world. Jake entered the strategy room at that moment. He had just returned from a patrol mission in the outer system. He reported that the Constellation had received a transmission from the Council fleet. They were demanding unconditional surrender. They wanted all railgun technology transferred to Council control immediately. In exchange, they promised to show mercy. Patricia's expression became hard as steel. She told Jake to send a reply. Tell the Council that humanity had already given its answer at the first battle. Tell them the defenders would meet them at the outer defensive marker, and tell them to bring everything they had because nobody was backing down. Not now. Not ever. As the assembled officers and representatives dispersed to their various duties, Patricia stayed behind for a moment. She looked out the observation window at Earth hanging in space below. That beautiful planet where humanity had evolved, where they had learned to stand upright and use. The day had arrived. 2 weeks of preparation had led to this moment. The Council fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. 300 vessels, the largest military force ever assembled against a single star system. They came in perfect formation, their energy shields glowing with power, their weapons charged and ready. They looked invincible. Admiral Patricia Klein watched from Defense Station Omega as the enemy fleet began its advance. Around her, the command center buzzed with quiet activity. Every station was manned. Every system was ready. 40 defense platforms hung in carefully calculated positions around Earth. 90 combat vessels, human and alien, waited at strategic points. Everything that could be done to prepare had been done. Now it was just a matter of executing the plan. The Council fleet broadcast a final message. It was not addressed to Patricia or to any military commander. It was addressed to all of humanity. The message was simple and harsh. Surrender now or be destroyed. Transfer all railgun technology immediately. Submit to Council judgment. This was the last chance. The final warning. Patricia didn't bother to respond. She had already given her answer weeks ago. Instead, she opened a channel to all defending forces. Her voice was calm and steady. She told everyone that the moment they had prepared for was here. The Council had come with everything they had. They expected to find fear and surrender. Instead, they would find courage and resistance. She reminded everyone what they were fighting for. Not just for Earth, but for every species that had ever been bullied by the Council, for every world that had been forced to choose between submission and destruction. Today, they would show the galaxy that there was another choice. Today they would fight. The Council fleet moved into range. Their formation was sophisticated, designed to provide maximum firepower while protecting their larger vessels. They had learned from the first battle. Their ships were spread out more, making it harder to hit multiple vessels with one salvo. They were moving unpredictably, trying to avoid becoming easy targets. They had adapted their tactics, but humanity had adapted too. The railguns on the defense stations were not just simple weapons anymore. Engineers had spent 2 weeks improving the targeting systems. They had calculated new firing patterns. They had developed tactics specifically designed for fighting large fleet formations. The Council might have learned from the first battle, but so had the defenders. Patricia gave the order. All stations opened fire simultaneously. Hundreds of railgun projectiles launched into space, each one aimed at a specific target based on precise calculations. The tungsten slugs streaked through the void at incredible speeds. The Council ships tried to dodge, but the targeting computers had predicted their movements. The first wave of projectiles found their targets. 6 council vessels exploded in the opening salvo. Their energy shields flickered uselessly as solid metal punched through them. The kinetic impacts were devastating. Ships that had seemed so powerful moments ago became expanding clouds of debris. The council fleet formation wavered as ships tried to avoid the wreckage of their destroyed companions. But 300 ships were too many to stop with one volley. The council fleet pressed forward and their weapons began to fire. Plasma beams and particle weapons lanced through space toward the defending forces. Defense Station Charlie took a direct hit. Its shields flared and failed. A second hit tore through its hull. Explosions rippled across the station as its power systems failed. The crew began evacuating in escape pods. Patricia felt each loss like a knife to the heart. Those were her people dying out there. But she kept her voice steady as she gave orders. The other stations adjusted their positions. The combat vessels moved to cover the gap left by Charlie's destruction. The railguns kept firing, a constant stream of projectiles that took a terrible toll on the council fleet. Jake was in the thick of the fighting aboard the Constellation. His ship darted between larger council vessels, firing its railgun at close range. The tactic was risky, but it worked. At short distances, the council ships couldn't bring their main weapons to bear on the smaller, more agile human vessel. The Constellation scored hit after hit, targeting engines and weapon systems. Each successful strike made another enemy ship less effective. Envoy Ziktar commanded the Talnari contingent with surprising skill. The insectoid species might not have much combat experience, but they were quick learners. Their ships worked in coordination with human vessels, providing covering fire and drawing enemy attention at critical moments. When a council destroyer got a targeting lock on Defense Station Omega, 3 Talnari ships dove in and disrupted the attack. One of them was destroyed in the process, but they had saved the command station. The battle raged for hours. Space around Earth became a chaotic mess of destroyed ships, weapons fire, and debris. The council fleet kept pushing forward, accepting losses to try to reach the defense stations. They knew that if they could destroy the railgun platforms, the battle would be won. But the defenders fought with desperate courage. Every inch of space was contested. Every council advance was paid for in blood and metal. Commander Trevlar of the Vortan Republic died when his ship took 3 plasma hits in quick succession. His last transmission was a rallying cry for his people to keep fighting. The Vortan vessels, driven by rage and grief, launched a coordinated attack that destroyed 2 council battleships. They paid a heavy price for it, losing half their number. But they proved that even the smallest species could make a difference when they stood together. As the battle continued, something unexpected began to happen. More ships started arriving in the system. At first, Patricia thought the council had brought reinforcements. But then the identification signals came through. These were not council ships. They were independent vessels from dozens of different species. Small groups that had heard about the battle and come to join the fight. They weren't military vessels. They were cargo ships, passenger liners, even private yachts. But their crews had armed them as best they could, and they had come to stand with humanity. The captain of one cargo ship sent a simple message. He said his species had paid tribute to the council for 3 generations. He was done paying. He was done bowing. He had come to fight. The new arrivals were not powerful warships, but they didn't need to be. They added their numbers to the defenders. They provided covering fire. They rescued crew members from damaged ships. They showed the council that the resistance was not just about one species anymore. It was about an idea that was spreading across the galaxy like wildfire. The council fleet commander finally realized what was happening. This was not just a battle for Earth. This was the beginning of a rebellion. If the council lost here, their authority would crumble everywhere. Species across the galaxy would rise up. The old order would collapse. The commander made a desperate decision. He ordered all remaining ships to concentrate their fire on Earth itself. If they couldn't win the battle, they would destroy the planet and eliminate the symbol of resistance. Patricia saw the council fleet regrouping for the planetary bombardment. She knew what they were planning. She also knew that if they succeeded, billions of people would die. Everything humanity had fought for would end. She made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She ordered every remaining railgun to target the council command ship, all of them, at once. The command ship was massive, easily 10 times the size of the largest human vessel. It was heavily armored and carried powerful shields. Under normal circumstances, it could withstand tremendous punishment. But it had never faced anything like what Patricia ordered. Every functioning railgun in the system fired at the same target. Hundreds of projectiles converged on the command ship from multiple angles. The shields tried to compensate, but they were designed for energy weapons. They couldn't stop solid metal. The command ship came apart under the bombardment. It didn't explode so much as disintegrate. Sections of hull tore away. Internal explosions spread through its length. Within 30 seconds, the pride of the Council fleet was gone. Destroyed so thoroughly that there was barely any debris left. The loss of their command ship broke the Council fleet's will to fight. Ships began to retreat. Some fled immediately. Others tried to maintain formation as they withdrew, but the coordinated attack was over. The Council had come to make an example of Earth. Instead, they had been defeated. Not just defeated, but humiliated. Their most powerful fleet had been broken by primitives using obsolete weapons. As the last Council ships jumped to faster-than-light speed and fled, a strange silence fell over the battlefield. Slowly, the defending ships began to cheer. The sound spread from vessel to vessel, from human ships to alien ones. They had done it. Against impossible odds, they had won. They had defended Earth. They had proven that the Council could be beaten. Patricia slumped in her command chair, exhausted beyond words. Around her, the command center erupted in celebration, but she felt only weariness. They had won, yes, but the cost had been terrible. Thousands had died. Entire ships had been lost. Brave people from multiple species had given their lives for this victory. Marcus came to stand beside her. He pointed out the window at Earth, still safe, still intact. He reminded her that they had saved the planet,